It's very sad, but of course after all he wasn't a young man. Over there, over there. She startled me by adding. Put the piano there, I told you that before. She darted into the parlor in her rather rusty black dress, and I do not think she even saw me when I left. That was at 5 o'clock. Margaret must have been back at that time, but none of us saw her return, and officially she was still prostrated in her bed, with the nurse in attendance. Save for the discovery of the bird cage that afternoon, I can remember nothing of any consequence. Both our servants were jumpy, which was natural, and Annie's story of the man on the third floor now included a glittering knife in his hand, although how she could have seen it in the darkness seems rather unusual. Mother fortunately had been able finally to lay the whole disturbance to hysteria, and had not missed the album, and the trunk was still undiscovered, as was the identity of the white man who had helped to get it out of the McMullen house. Peggy was still there, very ill after losing her child, and a careful inventory of the rumors in the McMullen house had resulted in nothing. All of them were women with one exception, and this was the pianist at a local theater, who had been on duty all evening of the night the trunk was taken. The discovery of the bird cage was valueless. The gimlet-eyed man in Daniel's cart had gone with Daniels himself was back on the job that day. It was on my way back from the Lancasters that I encountered him. He looked white and drawn, and I stopped. "I'm glad you are back," I said. "You haven't been sick, I hope?" "Yes, miss. I haven't been myself." "I see they've had another death next door." "Yes. But this at least was natural." "Well, maybe, miss. Although there's such a thing as being killed by troubles. Still, as Shakespeare says, what's gone and what's past help should be past grief. I meant to tell you, miss, I think there's a bird cage belonging to Miss Emily Lancaster over on Euclid Street. I've seen it hanging in her window many a time. But it isn't the same bird. It doesn't sing any. I still wonder why he told me that. Was Daniels himself suspicious of the truth at that time? I think not. It sounded like and probably was purely a piece of information, passed on in case the cage was wanted again. Nevertheless, I telephoned the fact to Inspector Briggs, Herbert Dean being somewhere unknown, and they got the cage that night. But it revealed nothing, nor had the family which had it any information. One of their children had found it lying abandoned in no man's land some days before and had brought it home. The housewife had simply scrubbed it thoroughly, furnished it with a new bird, and thought no more of it. If it had borne any fingerprints, they were certainly gone. It was Mother who brought the first news about Lydia Talbot. She had relieved her to go home for dinner at 7:30, and she had not come back when Mother returned, visibly annoyed, at 9:45. "Really," she said, "it is too annoying of Lydia." She said positively that she would come back as soon as she had eaten her dinner and steamed a crepe veil for Margaret. "I'll go over and find out, if you like," I offered. "She may be sick." But Mother, who had insisted on Annie as an escort both to and from the Lancaster house, refused to let me go. "The nurse is there," she said. "And it's too late for anyone to call now anyhow." I was puzzled about Miss Lydia, but not alarmed. As I may have said, it is our custom in times of death to regard the body as a sort of neighborhood trust, and to separate the family from it with the same firm kindliness as that with which we separate the family from the world. Also, we guard over and watch it during the daylight and evening hours, although in recent years we have ceased sitting up with it at night. Little by little this duty toward our dead has been passed to the spinsters of the Crescent, as being presumably free of domestic obligations, marital or otherwise, and for years Lydia Talbot had been the high priestess of our funeral rites. She had enjoyed these brief hours of importance, and I was slightly uneasy after Mother had gone up to bed. I tried to get the Talbot house by telephone, but evidently someone had left a receiver off and I could not do it. It must then have been nearly 11 when I went out onto our front porch to look across at the Talbots, and to wonder if I had the courage to go over and see if everything was all right. To my astonishment, I found George on the walk, and at first I thought he held a revolver in his hand. It turned out to be a flashlight, however, for he switched it onto my face. "What is it, George?" "What's wrong?" "Nothing. At least I hope not. But I thought I'd take a look around. You see, we can't locate Aunt Lydia."